Okay, so let me kick it off. It is a few minutes after 2 o'clock here in close to Amsterdam. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. For those of you who have been attending other sessions, welcome back. I've noticed a couple of my friends from the International Masterclass L&D Leadership who have dialed in as well. So welcome, great seeing you. Wishing everybody a happy new year. Hope you had a wonderful time with family, with friends. Hope you're all safe and healthy. You know, I was on a webinar earlier today, a leadership program for IE, and you know, also reflecting a little bit on last year, but also looking ahead. And although we are still in a pretty challenging time from a virus perspective, I'm very optimistic that you know, we will see a big change in 2021. So I think it's important for all of us to hang in and make sure that we go through this, you know, the last couple of months, hopefully, that we have to deal with the virus, and you know, and hopefully we can go on vacation in the summer and things will change. Welcome back. So today, and I will introduce Dean a little bit later, an exciting topic. A topic that is, you know, on everybody's minds in terms of reflecting on work, and particularly work today, but work in the future. And you know, what we have seen through COVID over the last 10 months is a significant transformation of how work is done in organizations. And it's also exciting to reflect on what will happen next. What will happen post COVID-19 when it comes to you know, the future of work. So that will be the topic today. We have an hour to share a number of insights, or Dean will do that, of course. And just, you know, for those of you who are in the L&D community and dialing in here today, I'd like to make you aware of a couple of articles that have been published at the end of last year. One article is about how to turn our classroom programs into high quality virtual programs. And secondly, another article on more a philosophy on learning, liquid learning in times of liquid modernity. So you can download the articles for free from the IE Center for Corporate Learning Innovation. So please go there and check it out. And you know, for those of you who are new to the session today, I'd like to turn it over to Christine Fernandez, a wonderful colleague of mine who is part of the Center for Corporate Learning Innovation, who will give you kind of a 1 minute kind of, you know, a snapshot of what we are doing. And for those of you who are in learning and leadership development, you know, make this a place where you come on a regular basis to learn more about what's happening in the world. But Christina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nick, and welcome everyone to this first webinar of 2021. As you may know, if you are not new, the Center is a growing community for learning and development and for leadership development, and we like to offer tools to our environment that can be useful for you. And the way we do it is with this monthly webinar, with insights, with publications, and with future programs that Nick will tell you about. But today, I wanted to share also with you that the Center is also a way of thinking and a way of performing. And I'm telling you this because all of the events that we are facing at this beginning of 2021 that may look a bit crazy with the pandemic, with what we saw in Capitol, and here in Madrid, for instance, we are covered with snow, literally. And I'm glad to belong to a center that knows that there is a difference, that we have an amazing way and capacity to adapt to these kind of situations, and we can choose how we react. We can suffer, or we can transform that into a creative force. And this webinar today with Nick and Dean, it's a way of showing it, how we can adapt to these new circumstances personally and also in the professional world. So thank you so much, Nick. Thank you so much, Dean. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Christina, for the intro. And finally, as some of you know, I'm involved in a number of leadership programs at IE, at Nine Road, at the University of Pennsylvania. And one program that I'm very passionate about is this Executive Master in Positive Leadership and Transformation. This is a program for busy professionals who still like to earn a master degree, an executive master degree. This is all about, reflection. It's about boosting your health, health, well-being, and happiness. It's about developing human leadership practices, leading transformation, and also transforming organizations and teams. And it's an amazing program based on insights from a relatively new science, positive psychology and the neurosciences. So this program will start virtually at the end of January the 19th. So, we have a few slots left, 1 or 2 for the class. So if you are interested, potentially, you want to boost and elevate your capabilities, your skills this year, maybe a great opportunity. Finally, we are hosting, monthly webinars. And you will see actually on this slide a number of upcoming webinars. The next one is a webinar with Edward Hess, who's a professor at University of Virginia, where I've spent some time as well, an amazing writer, and you see some other webinars as well upcoming. So stay tuned. We'll hope to see you back actually at one of the webinars the next couple of months. And with that, I will stop sharing here, and I will give Dean the opportunity to start launching his slide. And it gives me also an opportunity to introduce Dean Davey. Dean is from South Africa, a wonderful, wonderful country that I really have enjoyed spending time. And if you have not been in South Africa, I can really recommend you to put it on your to-go list in the future. Beautiful nature, wonderful people, exciting place to be. And Dean is a former Deloitte colleague of mine, a friend of mine. He's an outstanding leader in learning and leadership development and capability development. He had a long career, over 25 years, in a variety of organizations, including, as I mentioned, at Deloitte. Where at Deloitte, Dean was the EMEA learning and development leader, also involved in shaping Deloitte University. He has been part of Grant Thompson, and now he is at E&Y, basically helping clients with topics related to human capital, people capability development, etc. Dean, has done his education at the University of Pretoria and a degree in law. But then soon after that, he discovered that this whole field of human capital, people development is so excited that he has, done a lot of work, taken a number of courses, certificates in coaching, etc., that has made him a thought leader in this space. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dean, who will talk with us about the future of work. Are you ready? Dean, I'm delighted you are here, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Nick. Must be one of the highlights of my life to be introduced the way you've just introduced me by the master himself. So thanks, Nick, for having me on this call. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be sharing my thoughts with you and with your colleagues. So good afternoon, everybody, from a very cold and wet Belgium. I'm just trying to get my slides set up. Can everybody see my slides? Yeah. Just double checking. Everybody can see my slides, yeah? Okay, brilliant. So it's a privilege to be able to share my thoughts with you today, especially because I think there's a whole bunch of like-minded people on this course who are passionate about the people agenda in business. And as Nick said, I realized quite young into my career that I was never going to be an auditor. I initially started my career as a chartered accountant and a lawyer, but I soon realized that I wasn't going to be good at that, and that I, quite frankly, wasn't, very passionate about it. So I embarked on then, it was around about 2003, a journey to really figure out what I wanted to do, and it became very clear very quickly. It was all about people. It was all about activating the people agenda in business. I believe that actually in organizations, we have a responsibility, and we as leaders have a responsibility to give people meaningful careers, because if we give people meaningful careers, then that means that husbands or men go home better husbands, women go home better wives, better mothers, better brothers, better sisters. Call me romantic, but I believe that pay it forward really starts in the work environment. And that's why my opening picture in all my presentations, when I do an opening to explain or try to explain how passionate about the people agenda, has got the Spidey picture. I don't know if any of you have watched Spider-Man. And in the Spider-Man, there's this one scene where Spider-Man's grandfather says to him, Peter, with great power comes great responsibility. And that's why I'm really enjoying speaking to different people right now about the people agenda, because I believe that more than ever, society and business need to focus on people. So it's a great privilege to be with you here, and I hope that I can share some of my insights around the future way of work. I'm not going to share too much about where I've worked and my background. Nick's already explained that to you, but really started my career in learning internally, and then slowly started to progress to the more consulting space. At the moment, I lead the EY business unit called Workforce Advisory, where we focus on talent transformation. And a lot of the topics we're covering with clients is around the future way of work and the people agenda in it. My wife would absolutely kill me if I didn't introduce her. I have two passions. The one is the people agenda, and the other is my wife and my kids. My connection to Belgium actually runs through my marriage. I've been amazingly happily married to my wife for 15 years. She's from Belgium. For those of you that are from Belgium, she was born in Beersel and did a university in Leuven, and she's actually a partner in Deloitte. So we have some interesting pillow talk conversations. So the topic for today is really around, are you ready for the future of work? And I must admit that prior to COVID, I've had many interesting discussions with different people around this topic of the future of work. Questions such as, what does it really mean? Questions such as...
Sorry for interrupting you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Sorry, most of the people are asking, in the chat, if you would like just to share in full screen, because at the moment the slides are, at your format that you are seeing.
Yeah.
So it would be a good idea, because the letters are very small for the audience.
Okay, how do I share?
I think you go down below your screen when the image. You will have a pencil.
Got the pencil.
I think the one is, hold on, because I'm not familiar with chat, but display settings. Display settings. Somebody said display setting on the top. They are saying, yes. Just go, yes. That is because that is a math, and I have never been working with this. So presenter view, hold on a second. Swap,
presenter view and slideshare.
Yeah, swap, yes, that is.
Yeah, are you sure? That's the one, because I'm, okay. Is that it?
Hold on, yes, so sorry for disturbing you.
Not a problem. You can see
Thank you to everybody in the chat who is helping us, okay? Thank you very much.
Yeah, brilliant. I was actually saying to Nick when we started the session, I said, it's quite amazing how we progressed in this technology stage. I remember 12 months ago, we were all using Zoom, and we moved to Teams, and it's a matter of learning and consistently unlearning. So there we go. Okay, so really, I think the questions that are generally being asked about the future way of work are really, what does it mean? What does it look like? When will I know that it happened, etc. And I think a lot of these questions in my mind were still a little unanswered and still hazy pre-COVID. today, post/during COVID, I have an opinion that the future of work is actually here. I think we know what it means. I think we know what it looks like. I think we even know what it feels like. Think about how you're sitting at home right now, remote working, and some of the emotions that you're going through, working from home, maybe you're in lockdown, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we are feeling this whole future of work and the advent of technology and how it's made us work more remotely. Really, the objective of this session is really to share with you very practically what I am seeing in the market, some of the movements in the market. It's not going to be a highly academic conversation with methodologies, etc. It's going to be me sharing with you how I believe the future of work was positioned pre-COVID, and how I believe some of that stuff, some of those things, some of those drivers and enablers have already happened and are happening right in front of us. I really believe that we talk a lot about the information age and the knowledge age. I honestly believe that we're moving into the people age. So the future way of work, in my opinion, is here. We're living it and we are breathing it. But in order to understand why I say that, I'd like to quickly take a few steps back to take a step forward. I think most of you would be familiar with what the trends were and have been that drive the future way of work, okay? And I think that it's important to understand what this is, what some of these trends are and how some of these trends are playing out in reality right now during COVID. And I classify them into three core trends. The one is really the technology trend. We've been speaking for ages and ages and ages that technology was going to change the way that we work. And the two drivers of that were always going to be, and have been to an extent, data. The use of big data to make business decisions, the use of big data to make HR decisions, to get insights, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then technology, the digital experience of people. We've been speaking for ages about the people experience. We've been talking for ages around how technology should drive interaction between people, how technology can be used in organizations and businesses to drive efficiencies, etc. And what was the impact of that going to be on the people experience? So nothing new, really, and in my mind, the key driver of this new way of work has always been, to a certain extent, technology and the evolution of technology. All right. So I think we can agree on that. The second real driver of the future way of work or trend that we've been discussing for ages was the behavioral side, the human side, okay? And there are a few buckets to that. For example, the generation gaps, the advent of the millennials, the baby boomers, etc. How were the millennials going to affect the workplace, the digital natives, the popcorn society, etc., as they were called, right? How were we going to bring them in to this operating environment where there's already 4 generations working together, okay? So that was one of the key trends that we were always thinking about that was going to drive the future way of work. The other trend was obviously a flexible and global workforce, all right? So a flexible and global workforce was already around contingent workers. It was really around how would we organize ourselves better on contractors, etc., and how would that affect our operating models, knowing that there was a move towards the more contract side of work. The third trend was really about flexibility, and that's a big one. I think that one's become more true than ever in the current situation around flexibility, and I'll speak a little bit more about that. People have for a long time been speaking about work-life balance, and then it became work-life integration, etc., etc. And you know, I'll take you through the historic trends that we've seen specific to that one, because I believe that's an important one, an important driver of where we're going in the future around what I would call future of work 2. The fourth one was purpose around the people experience. I think for quite a long time now, purpose has taken its rightful place in driving organizational strategy and ways of work. You think about many of the organizations which have driven their operating model and the way they treat their people around purpose. Guys like Simon Sinek doing a fantastic work in this space. And pre-COVID, we're already starting to see that organizations were becoming very purposeful in their activities, actions, and strategic intent. So the first two drivers, the one is the Bytes, the technology. The second one is really the behaviors. The third one, which was always there, but has become even more relevant, was this whole thing of office space, the bricks. And we went through this whole thing of activity-based presence, etc. was the last one before COVID. Mobility, where should we have businesses physically? Is the physical still important? A lot of the open plan stuff, etc., was all the trends, etc., etc. So, you know, with that in mind, I think we got to consider the future way of work had certain preemptive assumptions, preemptive drivers, and let's see where we end up. So, in our experience, and in my experience over the last 5 or so years, when I look at the market, and I really want to speak to you about what we're seeing in the market today, there were kind of 4 categories of people. There were those that were thinking about the future way of work, or it was kind of in their blind spot. And it was like the brother in jail. You know he's there, but you don't speak of him or her. The second type of people was really those that were planning for it. They were talking about it. They were engaging with consultants. They were planning for it, but they never really took that bold step towards it. The third type of organizations that we came across were those that were playing with it, those on the seesaw, right? Those that were either doing a sort of a pilot or a prototype in a specific aspect of the future of work around the 3 drivers. And then there were those that did a pilot and jumped straight into it. And generally organizations would be playing across the spectrum. Some organizations would, for example, be very strong in the technology piece and were jumping into technology implementation, but weren't necessarily talking about the behaviors and the buildings behind that. What we've seen COVID do is actually make a lot of people jump, and not only to one space of considering the technology or considering the behaviors or considering the property and the bricks, but actually starting to integrate these 3 drivers and start consider them in an integrated fashion, right? So when you look at pre-COVID, around the Bytes piece, which is the technology piece, what we saw in the market, that a lot of organizations were focusing on ERP implementation and technology. And the main reason for that was really around cost effectiveness. It was to a little extent sometimes around the people experience on the really mature organization, but mostly it was cost effectiveness. Mostly it was finance and operations, and very seldom in HR to drive the people experience. Sticking to the Bytes piece pre-COVID, we saw that data usage was scattered to make decisions and give insights. And most of the data that was gathered was really on the front end, the customer end of the organization. Not many organizations were using data really to drive the people experience. I'm not saying nobody was, but across the board, a smaller percentage was using data to drive the people experience. And one of the things we started seeing before COVID really was that RPA, robotic process automation, was starting to get quite a lot of traction, but again, with intent for cost reduction. All right. When you start looking pre-COVID at some of the behaviors that came through or were starting to come through strongly, we started noticing that organizations were talking about flexibility and mobility and remote working. But there was generally a consensus that it wasn't the preferred operating model. And a lot of the discussions were really around, can we trust our people to be effective and productive if they're not in the office? Obviously, in organizations such as the public sector, in which we work quite a lot as well, the flexibility notion was a lot less obvious than in more mature private sector organizations. I'm not saying public sector wasn't moving towards it, but they were a little bit behind the curve on the flexibility and remote working space, which is quite interesting, because I'll tell you, they've taken a hell of a leap as we speak right now. And some of our public sector organizations are really jumping on this bandwagon full scale. The second behavior that we noticed pre-COVID was there was talk about the generation gaps, there was talk about diversity and inclusion, but it was mostly based around gender, etc. Organizations weren't really going, well, how do we deal with these generation gaps on a practical and operational level? right? There was some talk about the future skills, of course. Nick mentioned in his intro that future skills, and I think Christina, in our discussion earlier, you were saying that future skills, in fact, is quite a hot topic, isn't it, right? Yeah. What we found pre-COVID was actually that there was a lot of talk of future skills. There was a lot of talk about future skills in the context of new operating models, but there wasn't really an aggressive push towards redefining job functions, future skills, etc., at a rapid pace. Pilots were happening, but not necessarily at a rapid pace, right? And then, of course, the promises of the gig economy, in my mind, in my view, and in my experience, just remained promises. I have yet to see and experience organizations that really have not been successful, but pushed this, even post-COVID. So pre-COVID on bricks, yeah, this was obvious, wasn't it? I mean, what we found pre-COVID, the mature organizations were experimenting with agile operating models. So some of the mature organizations, specifically in telecoms, in pharma, were coming to us and saying, hey, we want to be agile, and we're going to deliver on an agile organization by transforming our operating model. In other words, the structural changes. And they would start flattening their org design. They would start flattening their governance structures. They would start working in teams and tribes and circles and all kinds of strange things and new ways of working, etc. But it really was a top-down structural change. I'll revert back to this one in particular when we come to the COVID piece, because the same thing's happening, but it's happening bottom up. So it's happening, move to agile through mindset shifts instead of hardcore organizational change, which is very interesting, because the guys that have been pitching agile for the last 5 years have always said agile starts with a mind shift change, not a structural change. And to be honest, a lot of us weren't listening, and they've been proved to be right. Very interesting that. It was a good learning for me during this COVID period. In the BRICS piece, we often saw that property was positioned as a savings and a mobility question, not really an integrated new operating model question, all right? And there was a lot of talk about smart office design. So this was kind of the picture pre-COVID that we had around the 3 key drivers of what I believe and we believe to be a future way of working environment, all right? So unfortunately, then COVID strikes. And what we saw in a survey that we did in EY across 5,000 organizations, and you can see the source date in the slide is April to July 2020. So we were very close to our clients. We were asking our clients consistently and the market, what are the things that you are focusing on? And guess who we were asking? We were asking the employers, management. And kind of in the beginning of COVID, this is what the responses were, right? In the beginning, the key focus point for the first 3 to 4 months was really around remote work enablement and technology enablement. Now that kind of makes sense because, you know, many organizations didn't necessarily have the technology to enable them to continue their operations. So the big drive, the beginning of COVID, was really around remote work technology. You can see in the slide there, 90% of management of about 5,000 companies told us that it was all about getting the technology right, all right? Then lo and behold, the second most important thing in COVID was really around business travel and mobility. That kind of makes sense. A lot of large organizations had people spread across the world and they needed to discuss mobility and travel, etc. And then for all of you in the Learning and Development Masterclass, those who are passionate about learning, yes, learning featured really high up on the agenda of employers because employers quickly started to realize that people needed to continue the learning and performance management cycle, all right? And we needed new ways of doing it, new learning operating models, new ways of delivery, designing and delivery learning content. And I must say, it's quite interesting to see how that space has really matured over the last 3 to 6 months. All right. Then some organizations started to think about their real estate footprint, about can we really rethink our property portfolio? We're moving to remote, technology's out there, people are getting used to using it. can we potentially think about how we structure our property around this new move towards technology? Then you'll see the fifth most important point was at that stage, and this is super interesting. I say at that stage, and you're going to love where this went in the last 3 to 4 months. Flexibility and well-being policies were still quite low. And I say 68%, but it's not as high as the others. And employers at that stage were still thinking that if we get through this technology, it was kind of a thing of, it's not going to last long. Let's use technology to actually just get through it, right? While we're getting through it, let's think a little bit about some of the short-term things we need to get through, like business travel, mobility. Let's restructure our learning and our real estate. But you know what, at the end of the day, this whole thing around flexibility isn't something that we've really liked. Remote working isn't something that all of us have always condoned or being a fan of. So it was really, really low on the agenda. And then even lower than that on the agenda was workforce planning and analytics. And I'll tell you what, those two have really picked up during the COVID period, because if you look at the next slide that I'm showing you right now, and this was done, this survey on the same population was done between August and November last year, right? Okay. And lo and behold, guess what jumped out of the bush and became the #1 thing that employers were talking about because their employees were talking about. Check this out. 98% of employees in the census or survey wanted to continue working remotely for the rest of their careers. It's almost like the bug had bitten, right? 98%. 84% of people were demanding better digital tools from the employers, right? 3/4 of the same employees were saying that if their employer does not offer remote working as the recognized form of working going forward, that they would leave their current employer. There's a statistic behind this actually, where 91% of what was classified as top talent, are you listening? 91% of top talent were saying that if their employer does not offer remote working as the preferred way of working, and in preferred way of working, generally the trend was towards at least 3 days a week, they would leave their current employer, all right? Just digest that. That is absolutely massive. It's almost like the shoe has moved and the power has been given almost to the employee around this flexibility challenge. Now, of course, this comes with many challenges, and actually that's really one of the things that we find our clients are really starting to come to grips with is flexibility, remote working, virtual leadership. How do we do this? Because it's here for 2 reasons. The first reason is we don't know if this is ever going to go back to normal. And secondly, our people are demanding this. All right, so very interesting. So some of the changes that have happened now in the last 3 months that we're seeing coming through in the Bytes and the behaviors piece of the drivers of future way of work. The first one in the technology is there has been a massive uptake in the market and in clients wanting to explore HR technology, but not just the suites, not just the ERPs, not just the Oracles and the success factors. We're talking real people experience technology here, where they really want to understand what their people are thinking. They really want to go into design thinking. They want to use tools and methodologies and thinking patterns such as continuous learning and continuous listening to understand what their people want, and using that continuous listening and that technology to make decisions based on collaboration with their people. It's quite amazing. We ran a webinar about, I think about 6 months ago, and we did a survey before the webinar. It was on, it was a survey. It was the topic was continuous listening and performance management, continuous listening and leadership, and how do you use the tool of continuous listening to really get to the heart of what your people want. Because continuous listening is constant pulse surveys, right? And the discrepancy between how management viewed the tool and responded to some of the questions that we had for that webinar And the people that worked for those managers and leadership was absolutely amazing. There was a discrepancy variable of 40% on most questions around how leaders viewed where they should go on topics such as remote working and what their people wanted and what the people actually wanted. It was an absolute eye-opener to me on how important it is really to understand what your people really are thinking, especially in these turbulent times where we need to be agile and we need to be in touch with our people. So continuous listening and all the technology around there, we're seeing a huge uptake in that right now in the market. All right, behaviors. One of the things that really is coming to the forefront is purpose, even more than ever. We're finding right now that leaders and organizations have to create a purpose, and almost on a quarterly basis that keeps the people engaged. Because let's face it, it's not always easy being in lockdown, being in isolation, working in virtual teams. And depending on your role, blue collar, white collar, industry, it could be even tougher for some people. So what we're finding is that organizations are coaching and training their leaders to, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, to set and reignite a purpose for their teams. And that purpose can be translated into goals, it can be translated into strategy, but it's really about, guys, what do we want to achieve over the next 3 months that's bigger than just getting the job done? Because people, when going through a tough time, are starting to rethink their own personal purposes, either in terms of what they're doing with their lives, what they're doing with their careers, and there's a strong connection now to organizational purpose. And the organizations that are able to connect a strong purpose organizationally to individuals' purposes are really able to ignite their teams. So that's really coming to the forefront, and we're getting a lot of organizations asking us to help them with that on a practical level. Yeah, I've mentioned employee flexibility. That is absolutely high on the cards now. Many organizations, many more organizations on a daily basis asking us to help them with this remote working, flexible policies, flexible implementation or implementation of flexibility and remote working. Something else that we're seeing that's coming up a lot, and I think, Nick, you were mentioning this earlier, is virtual leadership and virtual leadership skills. It's quite strange. I was doing a session the other day with a client, and we were talking about virtual leadership skills, and we started off with just the basics of leadership skills around setting a purpose and coaching, etc. And one of the delegates in the conference said, "But this is just normal leadership stuff. So what's different in the virtual world?" And one of the other delegates said, "Yeah, but we weren't even doing it outside of the virtual world, were we? Now we've got to do it virtually. So come on, that's even more difficult. We don't even have that contact with our people anymore." So yeah, it has expedited the thinking around basic leadership, how to ignite people, how to engage people, how to motivate people, how to performance enhance people, etc., enable people, but in the virtual world, right? And this links into the virtual skills, etc. Work-life balance become really important. I don't know if what it looks like in the Netherlands and all the other countries where you're from, but in Belgium, burnouts increased by 23%. And frankly, I think that's very low. I think it's more than that. But I can tell you on a daily basis, I'm speaking to colleagues, I'm speaking to clients where because of the compactness of the virtual world and being online all the time, people are getting burnt out quicker than ever before. So we're finding a lot of movement in that space. And then virtual learning I've spoken about as well. Around the bricks, what we really are starting to see, which is super exciting, is that people are starting to change their mindsets about operating models. And I've been saying for years, wrongly, that to drive an operating environment of resilience and agility, I always thought that you had to start with the model, the process, the whole thing of agile around working in teams and the team structure. And when you got that, you could start working on the leadership and you could start working on the mindsets and all that sort of stuff. What we're finding is that remote working has actually forced people to become more confident in the ability to use technology. And the use of technology gives you so many more options around being agile, especially a technology like Teams, where all of a sudden you can be working with 50 different people on different Teams platforms, on different projects, without having to run from that person's office to that meeting, etc. And it's just flattened the hierarchical structure, and it's broken down silos, which at the end of the day is really what Agile is about. It's end-to-end. It's resilience, and it's the ability to adjust quickly to the environment. So that's a super interesting one. We're finding a lot of organizations now are asking us to work on their mindset of agility, because agility really is a mindset. Virtual operating models. Gosh, we've had organizations that are starting to say, why do we need, if we're a multinational, why do we need a reporting structure in Belgium, a reporting structure in France, a reporting structure in the Netherlands? Let's just make a reporting structure straight to EMEA, and the operating model becomes virtual, and everybody reports directly or more directly into a more regional leadership model. And then obviously, a lot of organizations are starting to say, hell man, do we even need property anymore? Or can we just do this full virtual thing and go for it? And I'm telling you, even some of age-old entrenched public sector organizations that obviously can't mention names, but I'm in Brussels, so you use your imagination, right? Are starting to go this route where they're starting to say, in 5 years' time, do we really need to even have those buildings? And by the way, those buildings where we built our culture, in which our culture was steeped, the get-together, the coffee of interdenominations, etc. So, okay. So I think I've given you, hope I've given you a bit of flavor of how things have moved on. I think, let me just see, how much time do I have left? Wait, where are we? All right. So I think I've got another 5 minutes. Is that okay? And then we can do answers. Christina, is that okay? Yeah? I'll wrap up now. Thank you. Sorry, everybody. I'm so passionate about this. I don't think I think I could make this even a 4-day presentation. So excuse my passion and long-windedness. So let me share with you a little bit about what we're seeing. I'm a numbers guy. Well, I was a numbers guy. I was an accountant. I was a lawyer. Let me show you the magnitude of some of the things that we are seeing right now in the market. And what I'm going to share with you now is inside our CRM, the amount of interest we are getting in specific topics right now in the WEM area. This is just the WEM area, right? This is not a sales pitch. This is just show you the gravity of how many organizations are thinking about some of the stuff that I've just shared with you. So check this out. All right. In the bricks piece and move to agile mindsets right now, 172 organizations, right, that we are working with or who have approached us to move to an agile operating model with a focus on agile mindsets. 200 organizations that are talking to us about new competency models. You see, I've got the nice little T in there for obvious reasons, right? I mean, and not wanting to talk about it, not wanting to do a brainstorm about it, wanting to implement it yesterday in line with operating model and structural changes. Check this out. This is one of the most exciting things that I'm seeing in the market, okay? Back office or support services are starting to integrate themselves into one, what we call digital back office hubs. 15 organizations where they are talking and 7 organizations where they are absolutely integrating IT, HR, facilities, and comms into one end-to-end function. Why? Because we can do this digitally. Let's just figure out how to do it, right? Crazy. We talk about one point of call. We talk about an HR business partner. Gosh, we got to start figuring out. We got to start figuring out new names for this, and we are as we work on this with our clients. End-to-end regional office I already spoke about. 14 organizations right now saying, hell, we don't need Brussels. Hell, we don't need France. Let's go for EMEA. All the impact that has on operating models because of the ability to work remotely. Imagine the tax implications of those. If there's any of you If any of you in tax, imagine the tax implications of I live in Brussels, but I actually am employed, wherever in EMEA, reporting to someone in EMEA. So the tax consultant's getting really excited about this trend, obviously. And then check this out. This is super, super exciting. 34 organizations right now that want less than 10% office space by 2025. And some of those massive institutions and some of them massive public sector institutions. In the Bytes piece, right? I don't know if any of you are familiar with Teams. Teams is a platform. It's like Zoom. It's like WebEx, except it gives you the ability to also operationalize your business. It has collaboration platforms. It is file sharing platforms. It is Planner. It's a great platform which a lot of organizations are out now using to operationalize their business. But they're not just using Teams. They are totally reinvented their business processes around Teams as a platform to become more agile and to incite creativity, to break down silos, and to force, in a way, new operating models. You'll be very interested about this. Those of you in the LD Masterclass, 167 organizations that are talking about technology in HR, specifically in learning and development. All right, check this out. 330 organizations that are changing their leadership models and competency models to what they call virtual leadership models, where at the heart of it is really virtual or digital fluency. And then all those other things that were spoken about in leadership development and competency models, such as connectivity, empathy, etc., are coming through. And 330 organizations are actively now engaging in a new leadership competency model, in line with what is now commonly be called the virtual culture. What does a virtual culture look like? And a lot of the movement here is towards agile. So in other words, quick alignment, autonomy, and then quick check-ins, and creating new practices and ways of working on a daily basis, where the leader needs to set the direction, let the team go, autonomy, bring it back, and quickly and rapidly work onto the next project. So important is this virtual culture thing. Continuous listening, I've already spoke about. 67 organizations are starting to use continuous listening right now as we speak about the preferred way for people engagement. Check this out. We've all heard about design thinking. Well, how's this? Design thinking with a focus on remote working as a base. How do we build our entire employee experience around this new world of remote working? Anyway, it goes on and on and on. New skills. Listen to this, virtual emotional intelligence. We've got organizations, 70 organizations that are asking us around this emotional intelligence thing. How do we do it virtually? And how do we do this work-life balance thing virtually? Anyway, okay, I'm going to stop there and I'm going to give my quick view and synopsis of where I think we've landed. I think personally that we've reached the Braveheart moment. I don't know if you've all seen Braveheart, but there's that piece in the movie. It's really sad, and I hate bringing out the sadness because this is a joyous occasion, sharing future way of work. But in Braveheart, at the end, Mel Gibson is kind of like he's about to be sort of executed, unfortunately, and he's got this white handkerchief, and he sees the love of his life. And as this axe comes down on his head, he shouts, "Freedom, freedom." And I honestly think that what we're seeing right now in corporate is that people are starting to feel free and empowered because they feel like this flexible thing is starting to become a reality. It's almost like, obviously being South African, I can't get through a presentation without quoting Nelson Mandela, right? But Nelson Mandela very aptly said, just before he was released from prison, he said, "We, the people, demand." And I honestly believe that we're at that Waterloo now where the power is with the people and the people are demanding flexibility. So in conclusion, if I was to give some advice on how we approach this, this future way of work, and I'll end there and then we can have questions. The first real big piece is get your remote working piece right. Get the digital skills, get your people engaged and motivated on the remote working. The second piece is really, it's going to lead to a new operating model. Once you've taught and empowered your organization to use technology and use it with a smart mindset, they are going to start creating operating models that you didn't even think necessary. Your biggest challenge is going to be your governance model, not your operating model. And that is going to lead to new cultures, workforce agility, etc. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment. That's kind of the process we're working with the market at the moment to approach this. And I hope that I've been able to practically share with you some insights as to what we're seeing in the market and manage to inspire you. So, any questions out there? Nick, you knew I was going to.
Thanks.
It's never going to be enough.
Thanks a lot, Dean. What I really like about your presentation is that you provide a perspective on what's happening currently in the market. What are the requests that you guys are getting from clients regarding, what to do in this different world moving forward? So I think that's very insightful. Also, the numbers that's building the case for it. So, a couple of questions. I take them also from the chat here, Dean.
Yeah.
One is, kind of the big question, the big elephant in the room. If you reflect on all of this, this means, tremendous change for people, for leaders, for organizations, etc. Kind of how to manage the change, right? So how to make sure that, this will work out really well. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, indeed. We're talking, Nick, when you're looking at an outcome in business, whether it's moving into the remote working space, becoming more agile or digital transformation, then the good old-fashioned Drotter and the good old-fashioned ADCAR still work. It really is around engaging with your people on a continuous basis to achieve the end goal. So what we're finding is, and of course, when organizations are going through this transformation, they've generally got a roadmap for a change management program. But what we're finding is going through the change, three things. To engage your people, right? And that's it. Keep your people engaged from the start. Set a purpose for where you're going and what the new world looks like, and let your people be a part of it. Secondly, measure it. So data, etc. Thirdly, engage your people, immerse your people in this change. Build the future, what we call user journeys for the new world with and around them, right? So the change management program now becomes more an inside-out change management program, right, than a top-down client engagement, stakeholder engagement, learning and development, communication. We've got to go deeper. We've got to engage the people. That, to me, co-creation right now is the mother of all recipes, in my opinion. Yeah.
Thanks, Dean. Another question. Yeah, on the one hand, you are sharing a number of statistics regarding the desire for people to work remotely from home.
Yep.
And I've also seen statistics and also based on discussions with people who say, you know what, my workplace, my home is not necessarily the best place where I can work virtually. I have young children around me. I'm in a small apartment. And, as a person, I don't want to be 24/7 locked into my home. So, and there are people, even there's a lockdown in many countries who say, I'm fleeing to the office because I'm desperate to meet people as human. So any thoughts on that, right? So are there risk that, companies are moving massively to remotely online while, a segment of the workforce is saying, I don't want to be at home 24/7.
Yeah, indeed. Nick, we picked up exactly the same thing. So in that big number, if you look at certain segments of the population that were saying we don't want to go back, for example, you mentioned a young mother with kids at home, where it's an absolute nightmare working from home. People that don't necessarily also, what we picked up, have the infrastructure to work from home. That's a big barrier as well. You've got to go quite deep to understand what those barriers are, right? And in my opinion, we're going to end up somewhere in the middle. I think the organizations that are flipping to totally virtual are forgetting that there are some people out there that in terms of MBTI are E's, like me. I need to be touching and in a room with people to get my energy. And frankly, the lockdown's driving me crazy. I have to force myself to think about how I'm going to get meaning from every day and where I'm going to get my energy from. So if you ask me where we're going to end up, we're going to end up somewhere in the middle on what we call the hybrid.
Yeah. And Dean, I know you have also been involved as a facilitator in a number of leadership programs in the past. And these programs happened actually in a venue, not per se a traditional classroom. But so one of the feedback I'm getting as well, there are, of course, a number of organizations similar to this to say, well, this online, Zoom is wonderful, right? So we don't have to go back anymore to any place for learning and development. So, any thoughts on that as well from your end?
Yeah, Nick, how many conversations over good, was it Dutch beer that we had over this discussion around e-learning and the move to e-learning? And I think in 2005 or 2004, research showed that, in 10 years' time, all the learning will be done via e-learning. Remember those days? We were talking about the future of learning. Yeah. Did it happen pre-COVID? It never happened, right? And I think the reality is, Nick, as we know, in the learning space, there's different tools and enablers to achieve different objectives, more effective than others. And when you get into the leadership and mentoring and coaching space, I firmly believe that face-to-face has always and always will be an important piece of that puzzle, right? Can you replace some of those interventions with Zoom and an online presence? Yes. Do you have to be innovative around it? Yes, you do. You need to know and understand those tools. But practically, when you get into some deep leadership development spaces, I believe that when the physical becomes safe again, that a lot of that will remove or revert back into that physical space. But we would have learned how to use tools more effectively, the digital space, to do some of that stuff as well.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. I'm taking a question from Pablo. He's referring to one of the topics that are important was inclusion. Now, working from home makes it more complicated to interact. So what are any recommendations for organizations when it comes to inclusion and belonging when people work from home more and more?
Yeah, very practically. It's one of the things that I believe should be thought about, planned by managers and leaders, right? Okay. So what we're starting to see is the leaders that are getting it right are getting closer to their people. They're having more meaningful conversations with their people. They're starting to understand the diversity of their people in terms of their preferences and how COVID is impacting them at home. We are able to go into people's homes and into people's private spaces if we use the tools effectively. But like I said, you've got to plan for it and you've got to understand your people. I mean, I must be honest, me personally, it took me 2 or 3 months, and I've got a reasonably small team, just to start understanding how my own team, each individual has their preference. And that is the diversity. Realistically, Nick, shouldn't we have been doing that anyway, pre-COVID? Wasn't that really what it was about, right? But now, but now we're forced to do it. If we want to maintain the sanity and the engagement of our people, we've got to get close to them and understand them. And then you manage diversity of that as a basis, right?
Yeah. I have one final question, Dean. I know time, but let's say if we look at E&Y and the other big four, the consulting firms, they have a tradition in working remotely, using technology for collaboration, etc. Now the question is, post-COVID-19, what will be different forever at E&Y? If you think about office, if you think about working, what are some of the things that you think will be here to stay for E&Y?
Yeah. Good question. I honestly believe that the flexibility thing and the remote working thing and the trust from working from home will be a big thing that will stay here. I think what we've realized is because of the nature of our business, we were quite easily able to transform to a 5-day working week from home. And in some cases, our business started flourishing, right? Our productivity started flourishing. And even the engagement of our people started flourishing because we started thinking about new ways of engaging our people. So definitely the flexibility. It was something that we all spoke about, but really dependent on who you worked for and which country you worked in, it was still a face-to-face, come to work, clock in, be seen at the office culture, right?
Yeah.
And I think now that's gone because I think people have proved that they are trustworthy and that they can get stuff done from home. So that's the biggie for me. The second thing, Nick, is, you know, mate, you know, when we were working for the Big Four, you've got a conference in America around Deloitte, you climb on an aeroplane, you jump on the aeroplane, you spend 3 days in Texas, and you hop back. Do we really still need to do that? We've learned that we don't need to do all that traveling anymore all the time, if it's not for, you know, it's reason, etc. So I think that mobility travel thing is also going to change a lot for us. And of course, that helps with the cost efficiency. But I also think it can be a more effective way of doing things.
Yeah.
So I think those two things for me.
Thanks, Dean. Dean, we are a little bit over time here. I want to thank you so much for being with us today, sharing your insights, you know, again, you know, reflecting on what companies are asking, what are they doing today and tomorrow. I think that's very insightful. Thank you for that. As mentioned, you know, when we are out of the lockdown, I look forward to being back in Brussels for a Belgian beer with you. To chat about the world and what's happening. My friends who are dialing in today, thank you for being with us. I hope this has been insightful for you, a couple of takeaways. I look forward to seeing you at the next webinar in February with Hess from Virginia. And I wish you a good rest of your week. Thanks, Christina, for organizing the event again, and for Gemma, and wish you all the best. And stay healthy, stay safe, and look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.